Hey everybody, I'm Nicole,
I'm Megan.
and we are ready for recess.
Today's episode is with Kareem Weaver, and we're just going to see what he's been up to with Fulcrum Literacy and all his work across the country.
Enjoy. All right, we're on. Welcome, Kareem. Thank you for being here with us today. We're so excited to have you on the Reading Recess podcast. I'm Nicole Ormandy here with my co-host Megan Garrica. And like I said, we have Kareem Weaver here with us. Kareem, do you want to start? Tell us, our audience, a little bit about yourself and your background.
Thanks for having me, Nicole and Megan. I really appreciate it. My background is pretty straightforward. I mean, I'm a longtime educator. So I have worked in juvenile justice facilities. I've done tutoring. I've worked in group homes. I've worked at orphanages as a principal. I was a teacher at elementary, mostly bilingual, as well as basically English only, sheltered English immersion. What else? Principal for years, and then I was a trainer of principals. I was the executive director of new leaders for new schools in the Western region, from California to from Colorado to Hawaii. I was a funder. I worked for new schools. I was in charge of the Innovative Schools program, where I realized they were trying to, great thing. And I'm like, listen, it's not that complicated. We got to teach the babies to read. So I went from there to Lord knows what else, something else, I'm sure. Worked central office for a while. I've done just about everything in education, but I'm a dad. I have a child who's dyslexic. I married a teacher, forbidden love down the hallway type deal. You know, you're not supposed to date in a job, but every now and then it is what it is. It's what it is. But I'm here. I'm proud Black man, loving father, and a proud educator. So I'm really happy to be with you all today.
And you are currently, among all things you've already accomplished now, currently the co-CEO and Executive Director of FULCRUM, right? Can you tell us a little about your work with FULCRUM?
Sure. So for the last few years, I have been working with the NAACP on its reading campaign here in Oakland. And I was the education chair and was vice president. And our president decided that we would focus on literacy. I asked, she's like, yes, go ahead. And so we really, really drilled down on getting kids to read as the civil rights issue of our time. And in so doing, I realized, you know what, I need to be doing this full time. But I was basically doing it just out of my own pocket and on my own time. I was like, I gotta do this. So we created Fulcrum, my co-founder Liza and I, which stands for Full and Complete Reading as Universal Mandate. And we just started getting after it, working with school districts, teachers and teachers unions, work with state departments, parent groups, universities and colleges, as you know, like how can we get kids to read? It's a very simple mandate. Our organizations works with people and districts. Sometimes it's a small consultancy type thing. Sometimes it's just as a friend and advisor thing. But we try to get people to help the babies to read. That's what we do, and I've been blessed to be a part of it for a few years now.
And we've been blessed to have you, Kareem. I think what I love the most about you, every time I hear you speak, you really prioritize literacy at all layers of society, not just it being on the teachers, but also being on the whole system, on the community, on families. I think we've seen, working in our profession, working alongside Nicole, we've seen a lot of admin and states really pushing a lot of money to professional learning, but we're not really seeing a lot of the student outcome gains yet. So what would you take, in all of your work you've done so far, what do you think it's going to take for a system to really start to change to see those outcomes for our kids?
Well, let me put it like this: culture matters. Culture beats program any day of the week. Now, I'm not talking about linguistic or ethnic or demographic culture. I'm talking about academic culture. What is the culture of teaching and learning in your system? How efficient is it? Clear is it? How consistent are people able to access what they need to serve kids? What's the clarity? What's the leadership culture? Culture. And that starts at the top, which means the board. And having some metrics and some expectations about the people who serve, mainly the superintendent, and then they would expect the superintendent to have expectations for the designees. So that's the first thing. The culture's got to be right. And you have to focus on achievement. Because you can, Lord knows you can focus on anything else. We specialize in, you know, the show and the song and dance and all that. You can't get distracted. We don't have time or energy. Most of us don't, to do that and serve kids well. So the first thing is culture. Secondly, you have to have North Star. What's your priority? What is it? If it's not literacy, be honest about it. But if it is, you got to go get it. But you have to get folks to agree, hey, this is where we're moving. This is how we're going to move, because this is our North Star, because that impacts everything else. The curriculum you pick, the teachers you hire, how you do professional learning, the relationship you have with parents, your relationship with universities. If the North Star is learning, and we're talking specifically about literacy, it changes everything else. So that listen, I go down the line. You should have instructional norms. The principal is the key lever. I know that's not popular to say. Usually we say the teachers are the key lever. Okay, sure, that's the point of service. But who's supporting the teachers? Who's guiding them? Who's providing them the feedback that they need consistently? Who's getting in their classrooms? Who's organizing or leading the instructional and academic culture? Who's building practice? Who's making sure the area is safe? Who's engaging with, like, all that thing? You got to have the right principle, and it doesn't mean you have to be perfect. But it's like in England where they call the principal the head learner or head teacher. The principal has to be the head teacher. They have to be willing to handle all the technical things that come up in schools and the adaptive challenges, the things that you can't put on a rubric that have to do with the humanity of educators and students and parents, but driving things towards academic outcomes. Well, that's a lot, but you could get the Cliff Notes by saying find school districts and states that are doing it right and follow it. Stop guessing. You don't need to guess. Go get the blueprint from others, see which one fits your system, and do it. Very simple.
I love that you brought up things that you can't see on a rubric, because I think so much we obsess with curriculum choices, professional learning choices, assessment choices, all really important things. But I think those adaptive pieces are where we're seeing a lot of implementations fail, not looking at teachers, educators, students, leadership with those human-centered approaches. And I think that's the biggest fumble I've seen in some implementations. What do you say to teachers who are kind of trapped in those systems where there isn't those essential adaptive supportive measures?
Leadership doesn't just have to come from the principal's office. Okay, if you're waiting on the principal to solve all problems and be the leader, like that's not it. You don't have to have a sign over your door that says leader to be a leader. You have to be able to communicate with people. You have to be grounded, have a core, and have some competencies that people respect and understand. The adaptive piece of things, there's no blueprint for it. It's a willingness and ability to be secure in your own space, able to communicate non-judgmentally and clearly about the relationship to the practice and its relationship to the North Star. In other words, we're not debating ideology. We're not talking about politics. We're not talking about your beliefs that all children can learn. Now, I happen to believe all children can learn. And if you don't believe all children can learn, guess what? I'm the principal, you're the teacher. We still got to work it out. Like, I can't just fire you. That's not how my system works like that. We come in with all kind of beliefs. People talk about diversity, but I don't really believe they mean it. Diversity sounds good, but tell me the school staff where everyone's a Republican and you can be a Democrat, it's going to go well for you. Or tell me the school staff where you can be, all liberal, all Democrat, and you can be a very conservative Republican and it's going to go well for you. What about that kind of diversity? Unless we think that we have to have these mono ideological, places for good things to happen, that's not America. That's not our society. That's not our schools. That's not our country. So we have to be able to work with everybody across ethnic lines, socioeconomic lines, linguistic lines, cultural lines, age lines, seniority lines. And that starts with the principal. How do you teach? How do you treat your staff? Is it different? Are you privileging some over others? Are you transparent in your decision making? Are you inclusive? When you choose that curriculum, are you thinking about teachers at all stages of their professional career cycle, or is it just experienced teachers that this thing is chosen for? Which oftentimes is the case because those are the ones on the selection committee. But somebody's got to say, wait a second, what about my new teachers who are oftentimes in front of the most vulnerable students, the furthest away from opportunity and promise? It's got to work for them too. So listen, I'm not into diversity for diversity's sake. To each his own, you go ahead on. You can have this. But to me, if it's not real diversity, it's just virtue signaling. If we can't even get along with our neighbors because of the political party they're affiliated with, don't come and preach to me about diversity and equity and inclusion in the schoolhouse. I don't want to hear that. You can't even get along with your neighbor. And through our service, our commitment to the goal and ideal, and our humility, the culture will build in a positive way. And you can't put that on the rubric, like you say. That comes from people just respecting each other, not trying to, foist their own beliefs on people, adults and kids, respecting their space and doing our jobs professionally and consistently at a high level. That's what builds. And I know, like I said, I know this isn't popular. I hate to go on about this, but I think it's really, really important that we have to have some humility about how we approach this work and not just try to micromanage and fix parents and communities. No, 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 no. Just teach. Just teach.
We've covered then, teachers have this role. Teachers are being professionally learned. We need the leaders to really go through the learning with them to be instructional leaders. Not just like logistics and things, but really getting in on the ground and knowing all it is that we expect of our teachers too. What else within the system then? Does it go above the principals in order to really experience success?
First of all, Nicole, let me just say, I would be disingenuous if I didn't say that those technical things matter. Copy's got to work.
Of
You know what I
course.
mean? Like some things just got to happen. The books have to be there, and I can tell you, in a lot of schools, that's not the case. Oh, the books will come next week.
Yeah.
The maintenance guy is coming. Come on, man. As a site leader, you have to. That has to be off the table so you can really focus on the other things. Okay. So with that being said, so you're saying what needs to happen above the school level for it to be fixed? Okay. Well, here you go. First of all, somebody's got to be in charge of literacy. Who is in charge of the district and what kind of authority do they have in the system? It should be in the cabinet level, right? I have seen it work one level down from that with some friends in Princeton, New Jersey, who have a very good set. They've got some experienced leaders and the assistant superintendent is in charge of literacy, but she's not the one holding it day to day. It's the person underneath her, but she represents it in the cabinet and does it very, very well. But the person underneath her is fully empowered with budget, staff, et cetera. You got to have somebody with the authority to make a difference and make a decision efficiently and authoritatively that is in the cabinet or a stone's throw from the cabinet. We've got some districts, my own out here in Oakland, California. The person in charge of early literacy is 5 levels down in the org chart. There's a soup, associate soup, chief academic officer, network soup, the director of K, all kind of different roles. And then it comes the person. Okay, well, if that person floats an idea up, by the time it gets to the top, it's probably been burst. Other thing, you have to have very good systems of professional development. And as you mentioned earlier, that can't just include the teachers. It has to include the leadership at the site level and the central, Lord have mercy, and the central level. So whoever that person is, that is, guess what? They should be going through the AIM pathway or the Gillingham or the letters or whatever it is. They need to have that too. And here's the key for that. We often say professional learning matters. Okay, yeah, sure, it does. And not just in the curriculum, professional learning on how to get kids reading. It has to be differentiated. We talk about differentiation for students all the time. What about the adults? Systems that are working oftentimes are differentiating the professional development. What I mean by that is it has to be aligned. The content has to be going in the same direction. Sure. Like you don't want people learning conflicting things. However, there is a level of bandwidth associated with each of these programs. So for example, if I was to say, we're all going to do letters training like North Carolina did, I got news for you. And nothing against letters. It's from what I hear, it's a great program. I mean, I've read their stuff. It's a great That thing is heavy. That is a graduate school level class as a professional development vehicle. It's best to have in a high functioning system to have a menu of options that are aligned, but they have different levels of bandwidth. And it has to be something that the teachers don't have to pay for. In fact, they should be compensated for their time as they do these things. So that's the type of stuff that when you're at the macro level, you don't really get that. You say, well, we're going to do professional development. Everyone's going to learn this thing. Okay, good luck, boomer. Good luck with that, right? You have to be tuned into what people actually need. So that's one thing. Another thing, system level, are the universities that are feeding talent into your system aligned with how you teach reading. So if you got a local university that's pumping in educators that are doing balanced literacy, they do 3Qing, Skippy the Frog and all that stuff. And here you are trying to do something that's aligned to the research consensus in brain science. And now you have to spend money to untrain these folks. When your people don't have that skill necessarily, they barely they're learning how to train people, let alone untrain people. At a system level, that has to be the case. Then there's some things that aren't necessarily aligned to literacy exclusively. It's just good practice. So, working in central office and advising people working in central office and leadership, I always say you have to do two things. One, you have to do a pre-mortem. My friend Margaret Goldberg calls it a pre-mortem. And you also have to do an analysis, a cost-benefit analysis of what works. All these programs that you have that are legacy programs that are in half the classrooms and functioning in half of those classrooms, does it work? Are we still expending resources? Not just money, but opportunity. In the business world, they talk about opportunity costs, meaning what could you be doing with those resources? Well, the time, energy, and talent you're spending on these programs that we don't even know if they work or not, you could be spending them on something else. So being very clear about what's in the building and making sure that those things are vetted, that people are on board with them, and that there's evidence that they work. Hello. So those are some of the things. And then at the board level, what are the policies around teaching and learning? Is there a policy that says the kids actually have to be taught how to read? Is there a policy? Is that, can we get an administrative regulation or policy or something at the board level? Or are we just going to say whatever happens, happens? Or are we going to depend on the state to say, the board has responsibilities to the community.
Kareem, I'm going to push back and tell you the biggest thing I hear from school boards. I was talking to a president of a school board for a state for their whole association. And he said to me, Megan, I hate to break it to you, but we spent this much million on these archaic approaches and programming just 3 years ago. And we're not about to put another investment in this because we got to focus on something else, math or STEM or AI or whatever it may be. What would you say to somebody who says that to you?
So that's a community problem. That's a community issue. You voted them in. Y'all voted them in. Unless they were appointed, but most boards are elected. Is that what the community wants? Is that what y'all saying? You want them to jump around and you don't want to focus? Listen, if the community says we don't care about literacy, we just want XYZ. I don't think that's right. That's not my jam. But other than that, they have to be accountable to someone. The board is accountable to the public. The voters decide. So that's why it's important to have a community coalition and say, hey, we want this to be the focus. We want our babies to read first. No. We want safety first. But number two, we want them to be able to read and read well so they can go get a job, start a career, go to college, something like that. So a board member says the things that you just mentioned because either the community has not made it clear what they want, or they have, and literacy is not on the agenda. Otherwise, they wouldn't talk with such impunity. Now, having said that, I would challenge them and say this. You think you have a math problem, but you really have a literacy problem. Because the dropout class is algebra. Guess what, friend? They can't read it. You think you have an attendance problem, you have a literacy problem. That's the reason why they get sick, right before school starts. That's the reason why they don't want to get out of bed. You think you have a behavior problem and a suspension problem. Guess what, friend? All these things that to a person who has not been in the trenches, I understand it may look like that. But if you peel it back and ask why, you'll find that literacy is the root cause of a lot of the things that challenge you. You want to have a science, a STEM focus? Okay, good luck with that when the kids can't read. Literacy is the pivot point. It's the fulcrum. If you have literacy right, everything else is possible. I got news for you. Your teacher retention rate goes up when the kids can read.
Yeah.
But their working conditions change for the better when kids can read. You're a lot of teachers, especially in the secondary, 6th through 12th grade, like their world fundamentally changes when children cannot or can read, how they approach their content area. So I would just say that, and alongside that, so that's to the board members, because they're oftentimes they're not educators, oftentimes, so you got to come at them like that. But within the house, inside the school systems, you just got to say, listen, everybody's a reading teacher. Everybody, the history teacher, science teacher, math teacher, you got to have some learning targets around literacy, about reading, even if it's nothing but a prefix here, or some daily world language around literacy, something. You got to work with us, and we want to be aligned so that kids can go deeper with complex texts, because we have engaged on certain topics, themes, vocabulary all along the way.
And so there's all of these pieces and people involved in the change process. A lot of people we talk to say, well, how long is this going to take, right? If I want to turn the ship from balanced literacy into science of reading, structured literacy, and really actually make it to the student outcome side, what kind of time am I looking at?
People are human. They break at a certain point. I ended up in the hospital emergency room, and my family was like, that's enough. That's it. Come on, Tiger, let's go. So at a superintendent at a district level, you look at Seaford, Delaware, it took them 5 or 6 years. It's about 5 years to really get it right. But they went from the lowest in the state to the highest in the state for 4th grade reading. You look at Mississippi, they went from 50th in the country for reading. Now I think they're like 21st. Took them 10 years. So it just depends on the size of the apple you try to bite, but it is doable. Like, that's the good. The good news is it's doable,
Yeah.
and what you don't want to have is it fall on any one person too much, or any two group, because people leave. Any one group, people come and go, initiatives come and go. You have to distribute the leadership. Classroom's a little bit different because you got a teacher doing their thing, but you have to make sure that it doesn't just rise and fall with one person, or else the success will crumble just as quickly as the progress was made.
I love this conversation. I think some people are just looking for this quick fix. Like, if we just do this one thing, we just buy this, next year we should see outcomes. If not, we're pulling the plug. And I think what's nice with the movement is we're seeing more sustainable approaches. And I think a lot of that kind of goes back to our earlier conversation when we were talking about politics and legislation playing a key role in a lot of this work. What's your take on some of the legislation on that being like a facilitator or even a barrier to some of these change efforts?
If you go on, Excel and Ed has this sub-site called Early Literacy Matters, where they have a map, and it's interactive. So you scroll over the different states, and it pops up 18 different policies and practices that need to be in place so that early literacy can take off and go well. And there's some states that have 0 out of 18 of those policies and practices. New York has 0. With all the big initiative, and I remember the former chancellor, I met him, I thought he was a great guy in terms of teaching and learning and his focus, but they had a 0 out of 18 policy environment. So I don't care how much social justice you talk, and I don't care what curriculum you get. When you get 0 out of 18 policies in place that are designed to support students and teachers in early literacy, it's going to be tough. It's going to take you a long time, and it's sensitive to change. On the other side of the spectrum, you have it was North Carolina with 18 out of 18, Mississippi with 17 out of 18. Like, let's get it. Like, those are policymakers doing the hard work. Each one of those policies, because they're legislators, they got to negotiate and they got to research and all stuff, and then they got to vote, and so it takes a lot. But I would say one of the, and correct me if I go off your question too much, but I would say some of the more important things that have to happen. So there's policy, and there's implementation, and you have to have a team to implement consistently over time. But there are some key things that need to be in place. Key things, implementation things that need to be in place. The first off, which is mostly okay, at the State Department level, what is the list of acceptable curricula that your schools will be reimbursed for? And if you choose this one, we'll we'll pay you back for it. There ought to be some evidence that those things work. Right? And there's a few, but not many. I've seen states with long lists, and none of them have evidence of success. So what we just throwing spaghetti against the wall because it looks good? They got pictures of brown kids in the book. They fit this agenda here or that, or this advocacy group is touting this one, or somebody had a good experience with it, or this. Come on, man. Our children are not guinea pigs. You ought to be able to say, hey, everything on the state list has evidence of working. And if it doesn't, if we're projecting it to work, you ought to have a little asterisk explanation on that. Because our children deserve that. Our teachers deserve that. You cannot just say, hey, we went to Ed Reports and it was green, which is what most of these people do. These people, most system level folks at the district level, that's the first stop is Ed Reports. It's green. Well, you should know that Ed Reports does not consider student achievement in its algorithm in any way whatsoever. None. They look at alignment to standards. That's very valuable. I kind of want to know, does it work? Are the kids reading? Are they learning? Because if that's not there, I really don't care how aligned it is to the standards. I want it to work. I want the kids to be able to read. The second thing is, and this is very, it's almost so simple that, if it was a snake, it'd bit you, which is you have to have materials that the teachers have the time to prepare to implement. I know for most folks, that's like, yeah, okay, tell us something we don't know. I'm here to tell you, I go to school districts all the time. I look at if they're a unified district, they'll have a union contract and it'll tell you how much time teachers get to prepare. An hour, a week. Well, usually it's like 200, 300, 400 minutes a week, maybe 50 minutes a day or an hour a day, something like that. So now I say, okay, well, how much time does it take to prepare for full implementation of this curriculum that you have for reading, for English language arts? They were like, what do you mean? What do you mean? What do I mean? How much time does it take to prepare for this? If you were cooking, I would say, how much time does it take to make this gumbo? Right? How much time? Before I even buy the ingredients, before I even sit down to cook, I want to know, because if I only have 15 minutes, I know I can't make gumbo tonight. You understand? That's common sense. But for some reason, school districts, they go out, they buy a curriculum that takes a minimum 500 minutes a week to prepare for, and they'll only have 200 minutes a week allocated for preparation time for their teachers a week. And that's for all subjects. That's not just reading. That's math, science, reading. And then when they don't have time to prepare for it, we say, we believe in all children and we have diversity, equity, inclusion. We have all these wonderful, high-minded sounding things. When we didn't even give them time to prepare, those children were never in the plan. They were never, and I don't care how noble your values are. This is not a testament of how good but doggone it, if you're in a chair, you got to make good decisions. You ought to be asking, does it work? Does it have evidence of success? How long does it take to prepare for? Right? Because if that's not there, I don't care how many pictures of Dr. King you have in there. I don't care. I don't care what's culturally relevant. If it doesn't work, and your teachers don't have time to prepare for it, this is all just a show. It's all smoke and mirrors. And so we got to get to the point where at the system level, we demand that our audio matches our video, that these values that we say we hold so dear and that we have, that it shows up in the decisions that people make every day about teaching and learning, and the materials and the systems that are put in place to support. I'm sorry, I don't mean to get all fired up about this, but this is an issue. If you tell me you believe in all children and you're social justice, social justice, and we believe diversity and inclusion, all of this, and then you have a 400-minute a week prep time curriculum that takes 400 minutes a week, and you only have 200 minutes a week, you're lying. You're lying to yourself. You're being disingenuous, or you're ignorant, meaning you just don't know. And having talked to publishers all the time, some of them like me, some of them don't, because I'm gonna be honest about it. They know that the school districts never ask. They never ask for results. They never ask for the amount of time it takes to prepare. They don't ask. So why should they spend millions of dollars running some randomly controlled trial to get results when these districts don't even ask?
Mhm.
Why should they have a committee and spend years of development, R&D, breaking down this stuff and synthesizing it and making no, forget that. They never even ask. At most, what you get is, well, we got to have a book in there for the bilingual kids. We need a book in there for the Black kids. We need a book in there for the dyslexic kids. We need a book in there for this and a book in there for that. So you get 10 books in the curriculum, knowing all those teachers don't have enough time to do any of that stuff. But it does the checklist. It can check the box. Oh, it's good for bilingual kids? Check. It's good for the Black kids? Check. Good for the dyslexic kids? Check. Okay, it passes. It's a bureaucratic world. It's a bureaucracy world. You got to get people in there who have enough discernment and insight to say, we're going to put this on the front burner, not the back. Even if it means, hey, I have a couple of teachers on special assignment. And you know what? This year, all you're going to do is read the research.
You don't have to ever apologize for getting fired up, because this topic, I hear Meg get fired up on this topic all the time as well. Megan likens curriculum companies to big pharma, and that, they'll just push and give and bloat.
Megan,
And
yeah, Megan, we could talk about this. I mean, I'm sure you see it. So what do you see as when districts are choosing, their reading curriculum, what do you see as common things that they're focusing on? What are they elevating as being the important thing that they're going to choose? What are the factors that they're looking at?
It 100% depends on the virtues and the people there, because a lot of people bring their personal ideologies into it that aren't aligned to the evidence base, kind of like what you're talking about all these different books. You've done a lot of work with Elsa. Nicole and I have done a lot of work with Elsa too. She talks about that, how it's like patchwork almost for some of these programs. I think a lot of people are just looking for a quick fix and I think they're looking for purely scripted at this point, because they don't believe in the power of the teacher to do anything correct. We're seeing the word fidelity thrown around like crazy. I was just in a school where a principal said, you're going to walk into the second grade classroom. They will be on page 173 and they will be reading from the script accurately. If they do not, please mark it in this checklist. I was like, where am I? I mean, it was absolutely insane. So I think I'm seeing a bigger focus towards like scripting to the T, and anything that provides something very script that anyone can off the street, business guy from down the road, or, I'm outside my house. They just took my trash outside, trash worker, whoever can just pick up this book and teach these kids to read. I don't think they're prioritizing the teacher as the lever. They're just hoping that this curriculum drives them.
Let me respond to that. I understand where you're coming from. What you just, what? I'm glad this is being brought up. What I have heard people say, what you have said, a version of that in many different places. I agree with that in part, not all of it though. So I think you're absolutely right. The curriculum companies, for the most part, is like scot-free. They can do whatever they want to do. Or no. They do what they do what they perceive the districts want. I remember I talked with one CEO. I won't name them. They said that Kareem, it's not our job to do all these things you're talking about. We believe that, but it's our job to give the district what they want. They said if we were in Texas, we wouldn't sell electric vehicles. They don't really want that in Texas. They want big gas guzzling SUVs. See, we go out of business if we're selling electric vehicles in Texas. He said, so we have to give them what they want. Now, it was a very robust conversation. Now, we pushed each other, and finally I had to realize they were right from a business perspective. They said, we have a fiduciary responsibility to our shareholders. I was like, man, in other words, talk to the customer. It's our job to give them what they're asking for. The customer's saying this is what we want. They want 3Qing, we give them 3Qing. We're not here to argue with them. They're the professionals. Professionals want this, give it to them. It's like, well, yeah, there's an ethical, anyway. Now, having said that, most teachers don't know how to teach reading. Let's sit for a little bit. Most of us don't know how to teach reading. We weren't taught in graduate school. The majority of teachers, and when I go to conferences, now I used to put this big graphic on the board and ask people how they learn to teach, how they learn to read. Most don't even remember, because they're part of that minority that kind of learned almost intuitively or with any type of program at all, whether it's Montessori or structured language or phonics. They don't even remember how they learned. They're both grandma's lap. And so you're asking people who don't remember how they learn to read who went to graduate school and Lord only knows what they were taught in graduate school. You're asking them to come in and be the curriculum experts and designers right off the bat. That's a problem, in my view, because you're going to get a hodgepodge of methods and procedures. But there's a balance between having something that is structured and systematic, step by step, rigorous, all that, with taking away teacher autonomy. Teachers have to be. It is a profession. You will never take away the art of teaching from teaching. You can't. However, there is value in having people with a set amount, with set content that they have to cover that is aligned in the domain of knowledge. Because when the domain of knowledge is aligned, you have greater access to complex text. And the ACT says that is the number one differentiator between those who drop out of college and those who are successful, is the ability to navigate complex text. You do that by deepening content knowledge, which means everybody got to be on the same page. Not the same page, literally, but the same domain of knowledge, right?
Yes, I agree with you. I think, Kareem, what I'm hearing is people are, do you watch The Office, Kareem?
Sometimes. I used to back in the day.
I think balanced literacy was so Michael Scott, like anything goes, improv. And then Dwight Schrute came along and now we're like this. And I think both are failing. So people are wondering, how do we, not Dwight Schrute, but move a little more towards integrative implementation, where you're like an actress, you have a good script, but you have to bring it to life, adapt, differentiate.
Yeah.
And I think some teachers are losing that ability in some of these implementations. And I think Big Pharma curriculum is saying, sorry, you have to follow this exactly the way it's written every single day, when there are some of those key pivots that we can make to be more effective.
You may be right. And this is what I always say. Rather than you and I trying to figure out who's right, because that's not important. What you do is you go to see the districts that are doing it well, that are getting results for kids, that are turning around, and find out what they do and do that. That's the answer. So we have a habit in education of everybody's got their perspective. I got mine, you got yours. Okay, well, what's working? Materials do matter.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have to be perfect, but you have to be able to implement them fully. Because these kids in the slogans, the bumper sticker kids, all children this, and we believe that all of that, those kids need full implementation. That kid with dyslexia, you better be able to do it all. You better, all those 10 books, they need all that. The high needs kids. So I don't want to hear about poverty and trauma and all that if you're not even trying to get those kids operationally by the materials you select and the teacher's ability to implement them fully, consistently, with the support. Now, does that mean we have to be on the same page every day? No, it doesn't mean that. But guess what? There's an assessment. The cure-all for that is there is an assessment coming up, a benchmark where we're tracking progress, and we're going to have a data conference about where kids are at and how you're trying to reach these goals. Right. So if you tell me, hey, we had to loop back and do this again because they didn't get it, okay, cool. And by October, by November X, guess what? They need to be here. How can I help you to get there? Because we're not just, there was a time in education where you could do what you wanted, when you wanted, how you wanted. That time has passed. Kids can afford that. They circling the drain, going to jail. We got to cut that out. We can have some guardrails up and have materials that are aligned to the research consensus and have proven to work and that are aligned to our preparation calendar. Then we can have some conversations about autonomy and how you work within that to meet the individual needs of your students in the classroom.
We just don't.
You have me fired up. Go ahead, Nick.
We don't do this in any other profession, right? Like it's life or death, medical, automotive, all of these things. It's just really mind-blowing and beyond frustrating that we behave like this when it is life or death with our kids. It's just.
Why do you think we do that? Why do you think we take those loose approaches? Do you have any sense? I have my theory, but what do you think?
From conversation wise, it's that people legitimately think that they're right, that they've got this, this is how I was taught, so this must be right.
A lot of them don't know, I think, and this is myself included, when I was a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed kindergarten teacher, other than the assessment that I was given with my curriculum, we didn't use DIBELS or any universal screening system. There was no real good metric to assess my student progress for me to reflect back on that progress. It was just these poorly done CBMs, or even worse, like something I downloaded off of Teachers Pay Teachers with like my own
CBM. You
teachers
said
paid
CBM.
assessment.
What's CBM?
Curriculum-based measures, just like some of the tests within a curriculum I was using or something I hodgepodge and found. I didn't have a curriculum for my first 5 years of teaching. It had nothing. It was make whatever I want and good luck following the standards. And I think for me, at least, I felt that I didn't have a good measure on student progress because the assessments weren't really telling me anything.
We have to be confident. Sometimes I worry about us as educators. Are we insecure? Like, in order to prove that we're professional, we need to show that we can do this and create this. The level of intentionality and design and nuance needed to consistently produce great results is so high. It's so high. To expect teachers to do that consistently across a school. Like, as a principal, I did not expect my teachers to do that because I thought it was inhumane. It cost me a marriage. It cost me my health. I did it. Yeah, teacher of the year. Woo. Oh yeah, I almost died. I don't. So I and remember, teachers at different places in life as well. So you have to have tools they can use that trust and depend on. Most of these ideological conversations, most people, even those who are high functioning and they seem to have it figured out. Like, I was one of those people that came to me with a program. It was called Open Court at the time. The district adopted Open Court. Big fights about it. I didn't fight it. I went along with it because Marva Collins used Open Court. She was one of the best teachers that the country's ever seen. And so it had results. The old version of Open Court had results. So I understood the greater good meant I had to step back from my little fiefdom. I had to come down a little bit and say, how can I be a part of the team, for the greater good? If there's evidence of results, many of those conversations will desist. But if there's not evidence of results, and you're asking people to say, hey, change your practice, don't do this, don't do that, do it this way, do it that way. There's no evidence of results. It actually works. That's a tough thing to sell to people. It's tough. But if it works, if it's proven to work, if I told you, hey, listen, that district in Delaware, Seaford, like they used a curriculum that is scripted. And there's some room for some, teachers obviously to make it their own, but it's scripted, like highly scripted. But man, they went from last in the state to first in the state in fourth grade reading in a period of like 5 or 6 years. Are you willing to go for that? You willing to try that? Listen, man, a lot of teachers are just so desperate for something that works.
Mm-hmm.
They'd be like, sign me up, knowing that you will always get a chance to breathe into things. Always.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I really appreciate the human-centered approach and getting people what works, listening to what works. And I love that you said it's not what one state or one district, like listen to what all these people are doing. It's all a little bit different, right? We have these 18 indicators, but it's all a little bit different. And figure out which of those differences you need to implement in your system and just strive for that North Star. I think that's so, so critical. I really appreciate what you said about teachers being insecure. I think, honestly, our profession has been undermined so much, especially I felt like COVID was going really well. I was teaching first grade intervention at the time. I was like, maybe they're going to start to care about all this great work. And it just seems that a lot of that support for education has kind of went to the wayside. So I do think that that's a big part that we're seeing.
Many teachers feel as if the profession is not respected. Feel like, if I sit down next to a lawyer and a doctor, then people are going to look at me like the weak link, or especially people that teach younger grades. I can't. You know what drives me crazy? The one thing that really chaps my hide is when a kindergarten teacher or a first grade teacher, when they introduce themselves, well, I just teach kindergarten. Like, do you realize the whole city is in your hands? These children's lives are in your hand. You're a kindergarten teacher. Like, you shouldn't be. It's a thing of mine. It just blows my mind because you're establishing a foundation of knowledge and the joy of learning for a child to experience. Oftentimes the first one away from the nest, and with you goes the republic. And so it's like, but we're so used to, not everybody, but in many places, we're used to the narratives that are uh, just negative and critical. I mean, there's a lot to complain about in education. I get it. Like, I'm not blind. I hear and see things, but man, it's like all the time. When you don't recognize the sacrifice, the love, and the effort that people pour into, you can get this hyper vigilance and the cynicism and like all these things, and we have to be careful not to let those things speak for us in critical moments. I'm making this decision out of evidence, not as a response to my own trauma, my own feelings of insecurity, or none of that. None of that. No, no, no. It's about the babies. What's best in this situation for the kids? So, for example, when you're choosing a curriculum, oftentimes there's a committee and they take volunteers, they sign up. Well, who's on that committee? The veterans, the people who have the time to do that type of stuff. But and when they get in there, they do the thing like, oh, this is great, this is wonderful. Look at these bells and whistles. I can see myself like doing this wonderful thing, not realizing it's not about this. Come on, man. You can't make a decision out of that, of wanting to prove something and how. What about that first year teacher? It's got to work for them too, especially since oftentimes they're the ones in front of our most vulnerable kids. Hello. Structurally, it's got to work for them consistently. So you either have to put them on the committee or have them in mind when you're making the decisions, and remove ourselves and our unique situation from the process. It's the same thing with principals who are working with teachers. I tell principals all the time, like, listen, it's not about you. You have to be able to be what the teachers need you to be, or it's not your season. That's the wrong role for you. They need you to be this, that, and the third. You have to approach it this way. You have to communicate this way. And if you're not willing to do that, and then the kids don't learn as a result, then you are a mismatch for whatever reason, whether it's cultural, race, religion. I don't care what the dissonance is. If you're not able to communicate effectively, guess what? It's not for you. So there has to be some level of humility and perspective to keep the kids and the teachers who are serving the kids in the center of the process, so that decisions reflect what their needs are. I want educators to know doing your job and doing it well, doing your duty is enough. You're enough. You don't have to carry everything on your shoulders. Just being prepared every day, showing up, being ready, being consistent, being mindful of the goals, and all that's enough. I'm not saying you can fix everything in the system, but you can play your part in a broader picture, and that's enough. And I think it's really important. Only reason I mention this is because the teachers, sometimes we could take it all on our shoulders, and it can be overwhelming, and you can feel like, man, I'm not making a difference. Like, what does it even matter? No, it matters. You doing your job in your role at your grade level in your content area, that's enough. Y'all got me far. This is a great conversation. And kudos to you guys for running such an engaging podcast and your personalities, because it really does make me as a guest want to open up and share and talk and listen and all the rest. So kudos to both of you. Kudos to
We really are really super fortunate to have you here with us today. Thank you. Before you go, I have to ask, a lot of people know you, Kareem, from Right to Read, at least initially. And so that was so super inspiring and well received. And I thought I did see you post that you have a new film coming, Left Behind. Is there anything you want to tease with that?
It's not my film. The producers would love hearing that I'm hyping up their film. There's a film that was made called Left Behind. Now there's an earlier Left Behind series about like apocalypse and things like that. That's not that. Nicolas Cage, not that. This is a film about some moms in New York, and their kids are dyslexic, and they feel like their kids are getting left behind. So they fight to make sure that their kids get access to what they man. It's a good little film. I got a couple parts in there, speaking parts, and my nephew's in it and stuff. So, but I'm not the main person. I'll go down to maybe a couple of film festivals, but it's a really good film. We can't leave 20% of our kids behind.
Mm-hmm.
You just can't. To me, that's immoral. And dyslexia is real. It's not just about white kids or any particular ethnic group or whatever. It hits everybody, and those kids are being left behind. And what people don't realize is, yeah, okay, between 15 and 20% of the population is dyslexic, but you know, you got 43% of the prison population, 48% of the prison population is dyslexic, and 48%, that's almost half. So something's not right. 80% are functionally illiterate, but 48% are dyslexic. They're getting left behind. Now, having said that, 43% of self-made millionaires are dyslexic. And if you go to MIT, they call euphemistically, they call dyslexia the MIT disease, because so many people from NASA come and recruit from MIT because they got these dyslexic kids, they think outside the box, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not saying that anyway. So this movie goes over some of that stuff, and you don't have to give up. The reason why I like it, and it should be coming out. I don't know. I think it's the end of January. End of January. But the reason why I like it is because when I say all kids, I mean all kids. All kids. The NAACP in 2014 put out a resolution nationally about dyslexia being a civil rights issue. It is. They have a right to a free and appropriate public education. They got a right, and the truth of the matter is, those kids that get left behind and get pushed aside and all that, I got news for you. Those are the very kids you're going to be asking to fund your pension program. Those self-made millionaires, those are the ones you're going to be begging to live with when you're in your old age, because they're the ones who are going to change the world.
Kareem, thank you. This was, even before we started recording, when we're talking about the deep history of literacy, all the way through systems and our banter, this was really fun. We had a blast.
We did too. I appreciate it. And you guys asked great questions. We should have been running the tape before we started, because that whole conversation we had about the history of literacy laws in America and all that, and that's part of the story too. Maybe for another day. That's part
That'll
of the story.
Be another
too,
podcast
yeah,
episode.
right.
I'll do my
two.
research and we'll get going.
Yeah, that's part two. It's all good. Well, I enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you,
Take
Kareem.
care.
See you later.
Bye. All right, Meg, that was probably our lengthiest interview to date, and so totally worth it. I hope everyone enjoyed listening to Kareem share his knowledge and his experiences. Let's talk about 3 takeaways we have.
I think that one of the biggest things he kept hitting on is just the importance of a systems change, that from the superintendent to the chief academic officer to principals to teachers to paras to parents, how we all play a role in making change sustainable and happen over time. And it doesn't just happen in a year or two. Some systems take longer based on the resources and things that they have.
For me, I wanted to hit on the fact that Kareem really pointed out that literacy is the initiative. It is the, number one focus, and rightfully so, thing that we should be coming back to, right? If we see absenteeism, or if we see disengagement and things like that, have we evaluated the role literacy plays among those students? And if we're noticing these types of concerns, really realizing it does come back to literacy, and therefore our initiatives need to focus on literacy. We want to do something cool like STEM or AI, but we really can't do any of those things without literacy. And what role and impact are they going to have on students without literacy? And so I really appreciated driving that point home.
Yeah, like peeling back the onion, I think is what he said. And I really appreciated that. I think my final takeaway is really just, he hit on this a lot throughout the whole hour, but just virtue signaling. And what does it actually mean to be diverse in our selection of materials, in our resources, in our personnel, in our system, in how we communicate with one another? I really appreciated his take on that. And I think it's a very important message for the structured literacy community in general.
Loved it. Kareem, thank you for giving us your time today. We had so much fun and really learned a ton from you. No surprise. So thank you.
Thank you. And we'll see you at recess.